I almost feel like we jinxed it last week when we talked about George Steele and Ivan Koloff passing away in the same week. I said, well, I hate when we do this, and hopefully we won't have to do this next week. And turn around, it was, what was it, Friday or Saturday, over the weekend, everybody started tweeting the articles from the newspaper up in Canada that Bruiser Bedlam, Johnny K-9, had passed away. And Brian, you knew him because of Smoky Mountain and the fan weeks, and obviously I knew him in the same place, and we've talked about him before in some of the funny stories, but that just came out of the blue. Nobody, obviously, in the wrestling industry had really had contact with him for quite a while, but he was a young guy, 53 years old.
That's what shocked me, actually, because I knew him in 1994 at Fan Week. I didn't know him well, but I talked to him, and despite blowing up the police station and allegedly murdering people, he was very nice to me.
Yeah.
But when I saw 53, I was like, that can't be right. I mean, that means he was really young when he debuted in the WWF, and even younger than I thought when he was in Smoky Mountain Wrestling.
Well, he was like the time period that he first got in the business. He was like 20 or maybe 20 or 21. And Johnny K-9 was he just always looked, cause he was so mean looking. Once again, he had that look and that size. He always looked older than he was. But everybody wrote, and Lance Storm wrote something about it that was on Twitter, and I think Greg Oliver did a piece for Slam Wrestling, and hello to Greg. And, almost in any article or anytime you talk to anybody about Bruiser Bedlam, you would say the people that knew him from one world would say the wrestling world, he's the nicest guy, he's smiling, he's always happy. Boy, what a great friend, strong as and then you would read in the news or in the newspaper or the people who came in contact with him for the legal system, here's the racketeering and corruption and murder and arson. And I think the point of it lies in the fact of the first thing he ever told me about his legal difficulties. And we'll talk about how I found him in a minute, but his first weekend, he was talking to me and Hildebrand, Mark Curtis, and we've mentioned his tattoos. And he said, yeah, I had to get the tattoo Thru to the crew across his stomach, a giant stomach. He had to get that because when he had been in jail before, the people he was associated with had all decided they were going to get that. And he said, you don't want to get out of jail and come and find one of the guys didn't keep up their word. And I said, wait a minute, you're scared of me. He said, these guys, it was better to do what they wanted and live for a while than not and die immediately.
Oh boy.
And then I quit asking questions, but it goes back to, they say he was in prison for cocaine trafficking. But you know what that was? That was some people telling him, I'm not trying to excuse this guy's crimes while I'm knocking Trump and all this stuff, but that was people telling him, hey, you take this suitcase and you take it to these people at this place and you get the money they give you and you bring it back. And he was the guy that nobody was going to fuck with on either side of that transaction, right? It wasn't like he was the kingpin from fucking Colombia, El Guapo. So he went to prison. He was always in prison for conspiracy too, which means I'm with like Boland's father went to jail for cattle rustling because he was with the guy that stole the cow. So a lot of that was heavily overstated because of, unfortunately, the fact he was with these people and did what they told him to do. I don't know, and I would be greatly surprised if he ever actually killed anybody. I can believe he blew up a police station if they told him to. And as a matter of fact, even one of the murder charges that did not stick that he was acquitted of, I believe, he had told the officials, the police, hey, yeah, I told these people I was going to do it, but that's only to get over with them. I wasn't really going to do it. But, I couldn't tell them no. What the fuck? And just hope, okay, and they, I don't see them. They don't notice. They forget about it, whatever, right? Fade the heat. But he was two different people. But there was no happier guy in the locker room. No, hey, buddy, how you doing? A smile on his face every time you saw him. He was totally dedicated to the wrestling business to the point. Well, I found him on an independent show in Michigan. We went up, me and the Bodies and the Rock and Roll for a weekend in the summer of 94 to work for Gary Woronchek, who was running some independent shows there in Michigan. And later on was elected to the House of Representatives up there. And Bruiser Bedlam was Johnny. He was Johnny K9, and he was on the card. And I saw him, and I said, why have I not seen this fucking guy? I didn't actually know the reason I hadn't seen him before a lot. It was because he'd been in jail for a while. But just the look he had, the physique, and he wasn't a bodybuilder physique. He was a power lifter physique, but it was incredible, and it was impressive, and the tattoos and the face, the bald head. And I started talking to him. Yeah, I benched 600. What? And then I watched his match, and he could move for a guy that size. He was quick, and he took bumps, not too many, but he took them. And I didn't know whether he could talk, but a guy, truthfully, like that, you would probably want to bring in with a manager and have him be a kick-ass badass that can beat everybody. That's the way you get a guy like that over. And so I asked him if he was interested in coming to a territory, and he jumped at it. And I said, well, you might have to move down there because I can't fly you back and forth from, I think he was living in Canada at the time, in Windsor or something. He said, oh, no, I'll drive down, Jimmy. No problem. And so almost every weekend, some weeks he would stay at Smoky Mountain Flop House with all the other guys, everybody from D-Lo to Jericho on down, whatever. But a lot of times he would drive down for the weekend, stay there, and then drive back up for 3 or 4 days to Canada. And he would arrive in cold weather in a topless Jeep with no shirt on, or one of those muscle shirts from Bad Boys Gym and shorts with flip-flops, driving the Jeep in, fucking 35-degree weather. He was a beast, but he was never late, never had a problem, never said no or questioned a finish or, just wanted to learn and happy to be there. And when we brought Randy Savage down to do the big show at the Coliseum, I think it was Volunteer Slam of 94. 94, yes. Thank you, my son. And Randy came up to me and said, because I was going to do a DQ, because wasn't even going to pitch to Randy Savage to do a job, right? But Randy came up to me and said, hey, I can't do Randy, but I'm not going to come back. This is your guy. I'll put him over. I said, oh, shit. Okay, you call it, Randy, however you, and he had a lot of bells and whistles on it, but he put Bruiser over, and Bruiser for the rest of the time I ever spoke to him, couldn't get over that Randy Savage put him over and was thanking me and just so happy. But that was the crowning achievement of his career. He beat Randy Savage 1-2-3 in the Knoxville Civic Coliseum. So, I mean, once again, if you just transplanted, if you never saw the newspaper articles and you just knew Bruiser Bedlam from time in the locker room with him in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, he's as nice a guy as Bob Eaton. So I don't know what to think about the otherwise than the few things that he told me indicates that he followed his own advice. Better to do what these people want and live for a while than not and die immediately.
When was the last time you spoke to him or saw him?
It was shortly after we closed down. I got him a tryout match, a dark match, as they began calling them, before a Raw taping. And this was before Raw even went live. This was sometime in 96 or early 97. But, and they let me manage him and put him over some guy. And, of course, didn't come up with anything. I think they were just making me happy. But the thing was that Bruiser was not a guy who just went out in front of a cold WWF at the time audience who didn't know who the fuck he was in a dark match, even if I was with him or whatever the fuck, and was going to get over. You need to decide to use a guy like that. And then you figure out the videos and the ways to get him over, and you bring him in with an impact, and you have him beat somebody right off the bat or injure him. Like they did with Vader, and he comes in and he injures Gorilla Monsoon. You need to bring in a kick-ass monster like that with a plan. He doesn't go out and get over with his matches in front of a cold crowd and dark match, and then you say, oh, my God, he's great. So, but I was trying to do what I could, but he had worked hard, and I thought at the talent level they had at the time, I thought he could slip in at least in the bottom 33rd percentile. But they didn't do anything. And of course, once again, here's the kind of guy he was. He did mention to me one time when Terry Landell, who later on I did try to murder in Knoxville on Magnolia Avenue. That's been covered other places. When he was first fucking with us, Bruiser did say at one time, Jimmy, buddy, I can take care of it for you. You know this fucking guy? What the fuck? And I was a Bruiser, no, I don't want you to get in further trouble and, fighting my fight for me. Well, he's fucking with all of us, Jimmy. I said, no, something will happen someday. And it eventually did, but Bruiser was back in Canada by then. And so, when the tryout didn't anyway materialize with anything, I felt bad. And then he got kind of sidetracked, I believe, toward the late 90s there. And I lost track of him because he was gone away for a couple of long periods of time.
Everybody needs a friend like Bruiser Bedlam.
Yeah, well, they could come in handy sometime. Nobody would fuck with you when Bruiser was around. I'll guarantee you that right now.
I think my favorite thing with him from Smoky Mountain, I'm just laughing thinking about it, was when your union fight, the Federation of International Thugs and Eliminators, went on strike. And there's Bruiser Bedlam, the biggest, toughest guy in the world, holding a placard, marching back and forth in front of the ring because you're on strike.
Yes, we demand justice. Oh God. And but that's, he was the time when we were gearing up and training for the Savage match. He went to break the beer bottle over his head and fucking kept conking himself and ended up with eggs on his head and fucking buzzed his head open because he said, well, the Canadian beer bottles must be thicker or must be thinner. I can do it in Canada. He just kept bashing himself take after take over the head with that bottle until finally he broke down and let me bake it for him, right? But when he went in that fucking gym, he warmed up with like 560 or upper fives, whatever. And then they put the 2 plates on and he did the 600 fucking pound bench press. I was like, Jesus Christ. And he wasn't there 15 minutes. So just off the street, so, he was definitely someone you wanted on your side, as you said. Anyways, overall, once again, here's somebody else and I guess they said it, he'd had a respiratory infection and everything, but it's somebody else that's gone too soon. And he was in a halfway house. He'd been released from his latest conviction. He was supposed to go back to his girlfriend, I guess, in the next 6 months. He'd be free and out on probation, all that stuff. And, so it just another one that when you look at now, even the Smoky Mountain guys. And we didn't do all that hardcore bullshit where everybody ended up crippled and drug addicts. And there's still a high death rate from the guys that were in Smoky Mountain Wrestling.
I hadn't thought about that, but Bruiser, Jimmy Del Rey, Brad Armstrong. Yeah, I mean, there are
Candido,
yeah. How did I forget Chris? Yeah, wow. Tim Horner's career.
Yeah, well, there you go. His personality. That was buried long ago. Fucking bland ass hillbilly mother. Anyway,
I got to think that Bruiser's reliability though was so valuable to you that year, especially because that's when you had to go through all the bullshit with Jake, and then you had Conan Chris Walker who lasted like a show.
Oh yeah, he was in for a night. Had big plans for that young man. It was the same week he had to go out of the way to go home from the shows that he no-showed, that he missed. He had to actually travel that if he'd just come to pick up his money and make the shot, he was closer to it than he was to getting home. I don't understand that. Never did.